Nowadays, many people suffer from anxiety and the number is just growing. One reason for this anxiety epidemic is pressure from work and society. Another is the access of information and the ubiquity of smartphones. There are many reasons that could be mentioned, but at the core of the issue there is one prominent factor: fear. People become anxious about work because they fear getting fired or not getting a promotion. They fear peer pressure, judgment, gossip from their colleagues. People become obsessed with the phone and feel that they need to remain always connected because they fear missing something important. Directly or indirectly, everything goes down to this issue of fear. Since fear seems to be a central issue for us, what about trying to better understand how it works? Sun Tzu used it to say that one who knows himself and the enemy will always win. One who knows himself but not the enemy may win sometimes, but someone who knows neither himself nor the enemy will always lose. Fear can be understood at different levels, but ultimately fear comes from attachment. We fear losing things that we have and fear not obtaining what we desire. In the Bhagavad Gita, this is explained in the form of a chain. First, we contemplate sense objects, and from this contemplation we become attracted, which results in attachment. This in turn leads to lust. Lust comes from the contact with the mode of passion. Therefore, one way to reduce lust and attachment is to reduce the influence of the mode of passion. Krishna dedicates a big chunk of the Bhagavad Gita to explain about the three modes of nature, explaining it again and again in different contexts: types of food, classes of knowledge, according to the type of charity one performs, types of endeavor, and so on. From the 14th chapter onwards, there is not a chapter where Krishna doesn't mention the subject. The idea is that this knowledge allows us to associate with activities, places, foodstuffs, knowledge, etc. that are associated with the mode of goodness. It's just like in our practical life. We can know someone just by observing who he hangs out with. One who associates with habits in the mode of goodness will be influenced by goodness, while one that associates with habits in passion and ignorance will be strongly influenced by these modes. An even more profound explanation, however, is given in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam in the passage about the meeting of King Nimi and the 9 Yogendras. King Nimi was a king from this planet who had the opportunity of meeting with 9 liberated souls who can freely travel around the universe. Answering the questions of the king, they explained how one can become free of fear. Fear arises when a living entity misidentifies himself as the material body because of absorption in the external illusory energy of the Lord. When the living entity thus turns away from the Supreme Lord, he also forgets his own constitutional position as a servant of the Lord. This bewildering, fearful condition is affected by the potence for illusion, called Maya. Therefore, an intelligent person should engage unflinchingly in the unalloyed devotional service of the Lord, under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual master. Ultimately, we fear when we see things separated from the divine. Everything that is connected with the divine is spiritual and thus permanent, while everything that is disconnected is material and therefore ephemeral and temporary. When we see the connection, we can realize the real nature of a person or object, but when we fail to realize it, we see only the material reflection. It's mentioned that the material energy is just like a shadow that, although resembles the form and reality of the spiritual sphere, is actually ephemeral and impermanent. A shadow is constantly changing due to the interaction between different sources of light, appearing, disappearing, and moving according to different circumstances. Similarly, everything that exists in this material world is the result of interactions between the three modes of nature. Just like a shadow, such objects are impermanent and subject to constant change. This creates serious problems for one who becomes attached to them. Our situation in this temporary world is just like someone living in the desert who becomes attached to an ice cube. No matter what he does, it's just a matter of time before it melts. His attachment to the ice cube will lead to fear, which may lead to anxiety and other problems. A beautiful woman may be very attached to her appearance and thus try to preserve her beauty at all costs, fearing becoming old and wrinkled. She may be able to keep things tied up for a few years, but ultimately she will be fighting a lost battle. Time will always win, and the attachment will simply lead to suffering and frustration later. Similarly, one becomes attached to his car, to his house, to his family, and ultimately to his own body, and thus desperately tries to preserve all these things, but ultimately time will win. What he will not be forced to part with during his life, he will be forced to leave at the time of death. The attachment will simply give birth to suffering. However, when we are connected to the divine and see things in a relationship with this main connection, everything works differently. The divine can be understood in three aspects, defined in the Vedic literature as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. The aspect of Brahman is impersonal and vague. One who realizes this aspect sees the divine as a spiritual force that is beyond this material cosmos. One who realizes the Paramatma aspect understands that apart from being a spiritual force, the divine also has a form and he is present everywhere. Finally, one who realizes the Bhagavan aspect can understand that the divine has an unlimited spiritual form who is the source of all that exists. The Vedas call him Krishna. The Bhagavan aspect is defined in the term Supreme Personality of Godhead, used by A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada in his books. This eternal relationship of the soul with the divine can be realized through the process of Bhakti Yoga. By understanding how persons and objects are connected with the divine, one can realize their true spiritual nature, the real form instead of the exterior shadow. A Bhakti Yogi may be attached to his family, but he doesn't see them as material bodies, but as souls, eternally connected to Krishna. His relationship with them is based on their eternal identities, not in their material bodies. On this basis, his relationship with his family members is spiritual and thus eternal. Death becomes just a passage. They are going to remain connected in the spiritual world. Similarly, as one progresses in his practice, he is going to start developing a certain relationship with Krishna, and naturally he will be attached to this relationship. The difference is that this relationship is eternal, and thus one never will have to fear the end. This is the difference between material and spiritual, and the true process to overcome fear.